Good morning, folks. This is Mr. Dan coming to you from the Landscape Design Classroom, and today I'm going to talk to you about the basics of soil erosion control. So, main idea here, what is required to reduce and control soil erosion? So, the loss of soil due to wind and or water. Great progress in reducing cropland erosion since the early 1980s. So if we take a look at some of the charts here, the chart here on the bottom, we see erosion on cropland by year. We have wind erosion, which is about 1.38 billion or 1.38 billion tons, and we have sheet and rill erosion, more from water on the bottom, which is 1.67 back in 1982. We've actually reduced this amount over the years, going back to 2010, which is about 0.74 for wind and 0.98 for sheet and rill. So how improvements happen? Soil conserving practices like residue management, contour tillage, strip cropping, and land retirement. Cropland placed into the Conservation Reserve Program. Conservation requirements for CRP land. And when we classify these lands, land capability classification system, which evaluates land use based on ability to produce common cultivated crops and pasture plants without long-term deterioration. So factors used to classify land include soil texture, slope, structure, topsoil depth. And then we have our classes here. So the numerals indicate progressively greater limitations and narrow choices for practical use. So our class 1 lands are going to be the best, and class 8 are going to have the most limitations. So if we take a look here, we have some really nice crops here in class 1 and class 2 with our grasslands. This grassland over here at class 3. Then once you get up into like more mountainous regions, you're not able to do as much with it. So that's typically going to be a class 8. So some class descriptions. Class 1 land is nearly level, well-drained, deep, medium textured, not subject to erosion or flooding, and is easily cultivated. Very productive, little risk of erosion. Class 2 may have a gentle slope, may suffer from the effects of past erosion, may have less than ideal depth and some drainage problems, is suitable for all types of farming with careful soil management to prevent erosion. More classes, class 3 lands are moderately good, may have a 6 to 12% slope, but be highly susceptible to erosion damage problems and drainage or a shallow rooting zone, and can be cultivated if farmed with care. Class 4 lands may have steep slopes of 12 to 18%, which are still workable with, be subject to severe erosion, may have passed severe erosion, be very shallow, very dry, or very wet, may be cultivated with careful soil management, but still has severe limitations. Now, whenever you get into, well, let's talk a little bit more about class 4 here. So a system of diversions on class 4 land, a 40-acre field using a rotation of 2-year grain hay, 4-year alfalfa, and 1-year beans. So now whenever we get into class 5 and above, these are generally I wouldn't really use for any sort of crop production, but some people still try to do it. So class 5, nearly level land with some soil property, making it unsuitable for cultivation. Maybe in a floodplain, very wet, very dry, very rocky or swampy. Best used for pasture, wildlife habitat, and forest production. Class 6 lands are steep slopes of 18 to 30%, so you don't want to plant anything on these, and may have very shallow surface soil, suitable for only permanent pasture, trees, wildlife, or recreation. So generally, once you get above class 6 and above, you want to keep that for more forest land for wildlife to forage through. Class 7 lands are steep slopes of 30% or more, may be severely eroded with large gullies and very coarse soil. Impractical to establish pasture, only native grasses should be grazed. Best use is forestry, wildlife, and recreation. And then you have your class 8, which is 1 or more severe limitations, rock outcroppings, almost solid soil rock, or surface rock, river wash, stream bed, lake bottom, sand dune, or other nearly barren area. So these are best used for wildlife and recreation. Erosion controls, objective blocking actions causing soil loss. Some ways erosion can occur are splashing raindrops, flowing water, wind movement at soil level. So, two categories for erosion control. We have vegetative erosion control, which uses plants to prevent raindrops from striking bare soil and to prevent water or wind from carrying soil away. And then we also have mechanical erosion control, which is primarily a physical shaping of soil to slow water runoff or wind transportation of soil particles. Some examples of erosion control. You have cover crops planted to hold soil when land is not being used to produce a crop and can be plowed under to add organic matter to soil. So whenever you plant these crops in, at the end of that, you're going to till this stuff up and kind of like let it sit, because all that stuff on top is going to filter down into that soil bed. You have crop rotation. I'm a big fan of this. Reduces time producing row crops, includes legume forages, and to add nitrogen and organic matter. So switching crops every year, so let's say you do corn and soybeans year to year, having one year is going to remove some nutrients, putting the next one in the next year is going to add some of those nutrients back in. So as I always say, you need to do a little research on what crops you should be growing, because I know there's a lot of factors that go into that. So strip cropping, alerting bands of different crops, typically strips of row crops and hay. And then some methods of erosion control, grass waterway, a vegetation covered route where water can flow down slopes, often uses perennial grasses. And just a couple more methods here, conservation, tillage, any system practical to crop production that aids soil and water conservation.
Please dismiss one student at this time. Please dismiss one student.
Have a good day, Trayden. Thank you.
Yep.
And uses crop residue from previous crops to protect the soil until the crop is established. So more methods of erosion control, contour farming, plowing around the hill instead of up and down. Terraces, used on slopes where contour plowing will not control runoff, and used when the slope exceeds about 2% and is over a few hundred feet long. So if you take a look at this picture on the right of terracing, you can kind of see like the different levels that are going up, but we'll take a better look at some of that in class here.
Penn-Hill students at this time. Please dismiss Penn-Hill students.
So a couple more methods here. We have shelter belts used to prevent wind erosion, trees and shrubs, or just shrubs planted in a row. Helps the soil evaporation. At the bottom line, U.S. farmers have made great progress in reducing cropland erosion. Progress started when scientists learned how to classify land according to its best use and capability, and erosion can be reduced using vegetative and mechanical erosion controls. So depending on where you live at and what you're trying to achieve to reduce the amount of erosion, it's all about research. So that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, please give me a call down here in the landscape design classroom, but I appreciate your time, folks, and have a great day.